Welcome back, everyone. One of the things we help with here quite often for clients is international banking, what's sometimes called offshore banking. I've kind of played around a little bit with what exactly that means, but international banking. And it is one of the easiest things that probably almost everybody should do is to establish an international bank account. I tell people, if you have no experience with internationalization at all, the first thing to do is travel. Wonderful thing. You'll just have a great time in general. You come back wealthier. You have a better experience of life. You have lots of memories you can share with people, etc. And the second is open up an international bank account. And the reason for these two is, first of all, I just think it helps you to be a more worldly person. I tend to believe that every university should probably require at least a semester abroad. I think it's a great thing for people, and I think it connects our world and makes people a little bit more empathetic to people in other situations. And I think that's really wonderful. When it comes to a bank account, it's just super cheap insurance, okay? So a lot of when we're dealing with things like a plan B, what are we thinking about? We're essentially thinking about buying some insurance, right? And the thing about insurance that's really important is what is the cost of that insurance, okay? So if the cost is too high, so let's use, for example, a second citizenship. I've said in some previous videos, if you have an 8-figure net worth, you should absolutely have a second citizenship, period, no questions asked. And the reason is, it's really cheap insurance. It's gonna cost you 100, 200 grand, something like that. In some cases, quite a bit less. And so this is, less than 1% of your net worth. I mean, you can have your money in a savings deposit these days, and you can pay for that very quickly. And it's a lifetime insurance policy, so you pay it once. It'll last you for decades, can probably provide it to your family, etc. And so it's just a very, very valuable thing. Okay, very, very valuable to have a second citizenship if you're in that situation. But there we're talking about, 1% of your net worth. Now let's back it down and say, okay, you're low 7 figures. Okay, well now it's 10% of your net worth. All right, you're gonna spread it out over 20, 30, 40 years. Okay, probably it could still be worth it depending on your circumstances. What if you're like mid 6 figures? Well, now you're talking about like, 20 to 40 plus % of your net worth. Is it worth it then? It's really expensive insurance at that stage. And so I'm not somebody, even though, yes, we help people get citizenships every month, and I benefit from that, of course, I'm not somebody who is going to tell you you should have a second citizenship. You shouldn't necessarily. It depends on your circumstances. You should be in a situation where you consider very closely whether that is the right situation for you based on the condition that you're in. And if you have enough money, you should have an insurance policy. And if you don't have as much to lose financially, and there aren't other benefits that kind of will give you a big deal, then you should probably say, you know what, maybe I'll hold off on that. I'll work on building my income, building my wealth, building other things instead of going and spending so much. Bank accounts are a little bit like that, but the difference is that the cost of insurance is virtually free. I always figure anytime you can get free insurance, and this is one of the reasons I tell people, anyone who can get citizenship by descent pretty much should do it. Like, unequivocally, somebody calls me, they happen to mention, I have ancestry in Italy. I'm like, just get it. Just get it. Don't worry about it, just get it. Because it's a $1 million asset, probably more than $1 million asset, that you can get for a few $1,000s. Like, this is just an insanely good deal. It will just offer you so much over time in terms of optionality, etc. You should do it. A bank account is very similar to this, okay? So I think people are unaware of a lot of the risks that they're taking on with respect to banks. And this causes them to misjudge how important that insurance is. So let's just kind of talk a little bit about the risks related to banking and how this goes in. So first of all, of course, you have institutional risk, right? In other words, when you're banking at a particular bank, the bank can do a bad job. The first thing they can do is they can lose money, right? So a bank that is not profitable will eventually go under, and that could hurt you. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is they could not manage their short-term and long-term liabilities. So they might look profitable, and then they end up having a mismatch, and they could have a problem run on the bank, etc. So that's the second problem. Third problem is they could have compliance issues, and their compliance issues could result in them losing the ability to send money or losing their banking license or something like that. They could steal money, right? There could just be outright fraud in the bank. Usually this is a very low risk in a lot of jurisdictions because they're kind of well regulated around that, well monitored, etc. But it's a risk. On the point of kind of the compliance risks, a big part is that their other customers are a risk to you. Okay, so if you have, there's kind of that expression, it only takes one apple to spoil the bunch, right? One bad apple spoils the bunch. If you say they're bringing in some sort of a drug cartel, this, for example, has happened obviously in Mexico, and they're helping them to launder their money, or if you look at the 1MDB case and what happened there, bank goes under because of the fact that they have this one mega client who they're deciding to help do a bunch of stuff that ends up being discovered to be illegal, and off they go. If you're another one of the customers at that bank, you're being hurt by what's going on there. That's not good. That's bad. You want to stay away from that. But how do you know, right? Like, you have no idea which customers they're taking on. It's one of the reasons why sometimes people will come and, I've done international banking now for quite a long time. And so when I see a bank where it's too easy to do things, I'm like, ugh. On the one hand, I love it. Of course, it's great banking from a customer standpoint, but I know that's probably not going to last. And the reason is it will attract some of the wrong players, and those wrong players will spoil it for the bunch. That is what will happen. And how can you possibly know? You can't possibly know, You think this bank is very solid, et cetera, and you end up being exposed to their risk. Will it necessarily mean you lose your money? Maybe not. In fact, in a large share of cases, you don't actually lose money, but it might mean that your funds are frozen, in some cases for years. It might mean that your ability to send money is temporarily hampered. Like, it can be very disruptive to your life, et cetera, right? So then let's go beyond that. What else is there? Well, there's government risk, right? The government might do all kinds of stuff. So this was a big thing in Canada with the truckers' protests, et cetera. People got really spooked by the fact, and probably justifiably so, that some people's bank accounts were frozen because of the fact that they donated money to an organization that was perfectly legal, did something that was perfectly legal at the time, and boom, they get their accounts frozen. Now you can't go and buy groceries. That doesn't seem so great. So would you anticipate that? Probably not. Is there a place in the world where you should feel safe from that happening today? I don't know that there's anyone. Like, in most of Europe, would you feel safe from that? I certainly would not. I think most European countries would be happy to do that just like Canada did it. I think Australia, New Zealand, the US probably a little bit less. There's a little bit more fight back in the US in that regard. But most of the world, like, you have to be afraid of that. This could absolutely happen. They could absolutely freeze your account because they decide that something you did that was formally legal goes against whatever their current agenda is, and boom, accounts are frozen. So that's not good. Then you have geopolitical risk, right? Imagine that you're somebody from Russia, and it happens that one day you wake up and Russians have just been barred from a bunch of these things. You had this happen in the case of a bunch of clients and banks in some pretty major places, right? All of a sudden found that, oh, look, we're not allowing you to do this anymore because you're from Russia. What does that have to do with anything? Well, Russia invaded Ukraine. What do I have to do with that? I have lived in this foreign country the last 20 years. I have nothing to do with Russia. Well, So the point is, you've got a pretty broad array of risks. And I think it's really, really difficult to predict where there's going to show up. Certainly, yes, there are some places that have higher likelihood that things are going to go well than others. But you can never know for any given one. Now, certainly, I think there's something smart, just as a basic lesson, to have at least 2 accounts in the country that you're in. The reason is you could have a problem in that country. I have a good friend and business partner, runs a very normal brick and mortar type business, et cetera, but had some things go on in the bank, just decided, hey, listen, we no longer want this relationship. His accounts weren't frozen, he didn't lose any money, nothing like that. But the bank just said, you know what, goodbye. And that's kind of disruptive to his business because he's got this long established track record with that bank, and now he has to go and find somebody else and go through this whole opening process. And so much easier just to have 2 banks. Then you say, all right, goodbye, let me transfer everything over to this other account. And in the meantime, I can go and I can be in a situation where I can go and look for another institution. So right off the bat, locally, there's some advantage. But beyond that, the problem is so many of these other risks that I'm mentioning, this jurisdictional risk, this geopolitical risk, this government risk, these all affect you even if you divide yourself between 10 banks in the same country. And so the only protection against that is to have banks in another country, and preferably banks in a country where it's non-correlated to what you've got going on in your own country. In other words, if you have a bank account in Germany and you think you're diversifying by getting an account in Austria, the answer is you're probably not, right? Probably not. You should probably go and get an account in UAE or in Singapore or in South Korea or in the US or something like that in order to diversify yourself to a place that is going to have less correlation, okay? Very, very important. So, yeah, I think that people underestimate, I don't think they think about the fact that, hey, the bank's customers are my risk. The bank's loans are my risk. The bank's expenses are my risk. My country's, terrible things that it does are my risk. My country's behavior towards its own people is my risk. There's so many risks across here. And the question then becomes, okay, well, what is my cost to insure against that? And the answer is $10 or $20 a month. Whatever it costs to have a bank. In some cases, bank accounts are free. You can literally maintain a bank account for 0 cost. So you go and you open up another account. If something ever goes wrong, you have another account there. Do you need to use it day to day? No. I have tons of bank accounts I don't use most of the time. It's too much of a pain to use them. But there's a lot of diversification there. There's a lot of opportunity to protect yourself. So it's just really, really easy to do. And so for most people, what should they be thinking of? Well, if you're in North America, it's probably good to look at banking in some place like Europe. So places that are good, I kind of ran through some of them. So Singapore is wonderful. The problem is it's difficult for people from lots of parts of the world to get a bank account in Singapore. Often you need large deposits. Often if you're from certain countries, then they won't do it, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can get it, great. Lots of people cannot. South Korea, typically you have low deposits, but you have to actually go there. There's a bunch of stuff going involved. Is it an option? Yeah, for sure it's an option. UAE, decent place to have a bank account, but you need a residence permit. So if you're going to be okay to get a residence permit, fantastic. But if not, that's going to be an issue. The US is a great place to have a backup account for a lot of people. And so we often encourage people and help people to set up accounts in the US to have an alternative. However, the issue for a bunch of people is that they're already Americans, and so they've already got accounts there. And so then what? Well, then you have to look at some other place. If you're going to look at Europe, then usually most of the countries will not open accounts for you, or they require large balances. So places that require large balances that are pretty good, that you can open up as foreigners typically are Switzerland, maybe Liechtenstein. I'll kind of encompass them in the Swiss basket. Although generally Switzerland is better because Liechtenstein is more blacklisted than Switzerland. Andorra, and Channel Islands, so Jersey, Guernsey. Now, those require typically higher balances. If you're saying, hey, I can't have a higher balance, well, you can do things like you can get what's called a NIF and get an account in Portugal pretty easily. You could get some sort of digital nomad visa and get various different accounts in various parts of Europe, so that's also an option. Pretty easy to do. Some place like Georgia is pretty good if you can do that. It's become, goes through kind of these cycles of how open they are to doing international transactions. It's really easy to get an account in Georgia. Using the account for a lot of international transactions without being a resident is a little bit tougher, but certainly an option. If you get residency in some place like Panama, then you can go there. There's actually some crypto-friendly banking there, so that's good. Most of the places in the Caribbean, I'm quite against. This being said, easy places to get accounts are places like K International Bank in Belize, and there's some other Caribbean banks that you can use. I wouldn't say that they're good quality banks. They're not. But on the other hand, if you're just looking for a backup to put 5 or 10 grand in to have something, you're okay with it, that's fine. It's sort of like a tier 3 banking situation. Hong Kong could be good. A little more difficult for a bunch of people, but one of the good things is it is non-correlated from some of these other places. So worth understanding that I would say quality of banking in Hong Kong is far worse than Singapore. We definitely prefer to be in Singapore to Hong Kong. The issue is that Hong Kong has got a different set of correlations to there. If you're getting residency in virtually any country, you can end up getting a bank account there. But these will give you like a decent array. If I just kind of give you those as an array, pretty much everybody can get some sort of a foreign bank account through one of these things that I've mentioned. And that at least gives them some sort of protection, some sort of diversification. It costs very little. It's quite easy. And off you go. Then if you may never need it. Hopefully you never need it, right? The idea is not that you're going to need or use or think that this is the wonderful banking of whatever. You can help yourself a little bit by having a brokerage account in another country. If you're interested in things like that, you can reach out to us. If you need help with international banking, please send us a message through offshorecitizen.net, and we can kind of help you get set up depending on the type of account that you need and give you some sort of protection, because I think it's just absolutely insane for people to spare themselves $10 a month in the modern age with so much uncertainty without being willing to, exposing themselves to all that risk. So hope that helps. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. Like I said, send a message to offshorecitizen.net, and I will see you on the next video.